This is the final quilt in this baby quilt series, called Around the World for Elizabeth. The pattern and colors are based on a simpler version I made decades ago when my cousin was a baby, but I really fell head over heels for this quilt with the quilting. And I would say each quilt has been my favorite in some way. My plan was a common pattern called Around the World. There are many methods of construction, but the method I was planning to use was to do 4 main corners with strip piecing, similar to sewing a Bargello quilt. The corners would be 12 squares by 12 squares, then joining strips down the center. I thought this Tonga Treats pastel jelly roll was very sweet. Here are the 12 fabrics I chose. When strip piecing like this, I like to use a shorter stitch, like a 2.0. It's 12 fabrics, but I wanted to keep the yellow, green, purple, pink rhythm. Once the main panel was together, I took it to the ironing board to be pressed. Alternating the directions of the seams will help the corners match when I'm sewing the strips in the next step back together. After pressing, I fold the panel over on itself and sew the 2 edges together into a big tube. Next, I cross-cut the big tube into 2.5-inch loops. Now I have a stack of loops and my map. In order to make the diagonal pattern, I open the loops so the colors will form stair steps. Each loop needs to advance 1 color. Here, the speckled purple should be the bottom square. It needs to be separated from the aqua, so I pick that seam out. The next bottom should be the pink, so I pick out the seam between the pink and the speckled purple, and on down the line. I lay the strips out in order next to my sewing machine. Remember how I press the seams every other way? Well, here's where that pays off. I'm able to nestle the seams up next to each other, and as I sew, I'm trying to be careful about which way they point. This helps keep the quilt top smooth, and the big payoff is that the corners match. But even with all this preparation, I can still make a mistake. Bonus points to you if you can find it. I had to rip it out and try again. I made my 4 corner blocks and the center joining strips. Once the center is together, then the borders. Here's the quilt back, batting, and top for my quilt sandwich and pin basting. On to the quilting. First, I started playing around with the center medallion by drawing it out on a piece of vinyl with a dry erase marker. I'm pretty pleased with how the sewing turned out. And here's the back. Now I'm filling the spaces between the center petals with stippling. I find straight lines easy and fairly effective. My next row is spirals, then loops, and finally my favorite, the feathers. Here's the back of the feathers. Then to fill the corners, I did a spiral and echo. I love, love, love the border of this quilt. Here it is, Around the World for Elizabeth. The quilting is done, then the quilt gets squared up and the edges bound. I get a lot of joy out of sharing my process, and so thank you for watching. Have a good day.